Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Mel and today I want to talk to you guys about authors that I want to read more from. So I have a stack of about 10 authors here that I really want to read more of their work. I may have only read one book from some of these authors, some of them I have read more than one, but they're just people that I love the book that I read or the books that I have read, or just was really intrigued by their writing and just want to know more or get more involved with their work. Some of them have multiple different genres, so maybe I'm wanting to dip my toe into the other genres that they write. So without further ado, let's go through these 10 authors. So these are in absolutely no particular order. There's a mismatch here of like sci-fi and thrillers, fantasy romance. We've got a little bit of everything here. So the first one that I want to talk about is Blake Crouch. I have read 2 books by Blake Crouch so far. I've read Recursion and I've read Dark Matter, and I loved both of them. I actually want to read more of this like really hard science sci-fi that's also like a thriller, because I really enjoyed that mashup that he writes in these books. And I know that he has like the Wayward Pines series. There are several different other series and books that Blake Crouch has written that I just have not got to, and so I'm really wanting to do that here in the near future. Both Dark Matter and Recursion were 5 stars for me. I loved them. I was on the edge of my seat. I found the science extremely fascinating. He and Andy Weir are two that do that very well, where the science is part of like the world building rather than just something that's tossed in for the sake of the story. It really is extremely immersive, not hard to understand, but it's logical enough that I'm not sitting there going, that would never happen. So I definitely want to read more of Blake Crouch. If there's a particular book other than Recursion or Dark Matter, that you think that I should read, please let me know down in the comments. And then moving on to a couple of thrillers that I have sitting here. One that I want to read more from is Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell is one of those authors that I actually have read several of her books. I've read The Family Upstairs, I've read Watching You, and I've read another one, and for some reason it's just completely escaping my mind. This is the next one kind of on my list that I want to read. Lisa Jewell is one of those authors that I've either given her books 4 stars and really enjoyed them, or 2 stars and absolutely hated them. So I do want to read more of her books and see, do I like Lisa Jewell? Do I not like Lisa Jewell? I really do want to get more into her stuff and find out what about her writing I do or don't like. Then moving on to one that I've only read 1 book from her, but partly because she is a translated author, so we don't have a lot of her books that have been translated into English, even though she has a lot more written, and that is Camilla Stein. So Resting Place is the one that I have not read. I actually read Lost Village last year and really enjoyed it. The atmosphere was great. Even though the ending was a little far-fetched, the atmosphere was amazing, and I loved it. So I do want to read more from this author in the near future. Hopefully we'll get more of her books translated so that I can actually do that. But for now, this is the next one on my list. And as I'm sitting here, I realized that I forgot an author. So there's actually going to be 11 on this list, but we're just going to ignore that and pretend like I had 10. So the next author is one that I've actually only read 1 book by. I read snippets of some other books but had to put them down for reasons or another, not because I wasn't enjoying them, but because something just came up and I had other things that I was obligated to get to, and that's John Gwynne. I loved Malice. I thought it was really strong. The beginning was not my absolute favorite. It took some time, in my opinion, for it to really get revved up and for him to kind of settle into his writing, but once we hit the halfway point of this book, loved it. I cannot wait to continue the Fateful and the Fallen series, but there's also a spin-off series to the Fateful and the Fallen. There is the Shadow of the Gods series, so he's got so many books that I just really need to get to. Then moving on to another horror thriller author, one that I've only read 1 book from but absolutely loved, and that is Catriona Ward. I read The Last House on Needless Street last year and gave it 5 stars. I was so pleasantly surprised by that book, loved it. And I do want to read more of her work. I found the way that she wrote that story to be very intriguing, and it was done in a way that would have turned some people off, not gonna lie, but for me it was just so unique to write it was more of like a literary horror in that way, where you just had no idea what was going on, but there were just enough snippets that you had to keep reading, but you were also really confused, and there was a perspective of a cat. So I want to see what she does in this book. I know that she has a pretty extensive backlist, so I'm hoping to get to some of her earlier works. I think one of them is called Raw Blood, maybe. Anyway, if you've read a lot of Cotron Award and there's one that you're like, yes, this is the one that you need to read, please let me know down in the comments. So just kind of continuing down through the pile here, the next author that I want to read more from is Lana Petetric. This is a fantasy romance author. She has written the Fae Guardian series. I've read the first two, really enjoyed them, but she's also got a couple of other series, and I think she's working on some additional series, so I really, really want to read more from her, and I liked her world building. I think she did a great job with the world building. As a matter of fact, for a fantasy romance author, the romance was probably the weaker point for me in this book. Not that I did not enjoy it, it just was not the strong thing that kept me engaged. It was the world building and the way that everything was shaking down in the series. So very much so looking forward to reading more from her, and hopefully I'll be able to get to her, I think it's Carnal Sins series, pretty soon. Then we have the ever so famous from J.D. Ray Reid's Sebastian de Castell. I have read the first 4 books in the Spellcast or the Spellslinger series. I liked them. They're not my favorite, but part of that is because they are YA, and while it's swashbuckling fun, not nautical, but that's just kind of the word that comes to mind, they have a very YA tone, which is not my personal favorite anymore. So I'm actually going to be reading Traitor's Blade really, really soon, and I am so very much so looking forward to reading that series. I definitely will be continuing this series and finishing it out because I am enjoying it, but I'm looking forward to his darker adult work as well. Then we have like a same author, different pen name, Shauna Maguire and Mira Grant, which is her horror pen name, and then we have Shauna Maguire, which is her like traditional name that she writes under. Shauna Maguire writes so many different kinds of books. She has an urban fantasy that I really, really want to read, Rosemary and Rue. She has this like sci-fi fantasy hybrid with Middle Game. She's got the Portal fantasy. She's got Over the Woodward Wall, which is more middle grade. So Shauna Maguire does it all. She does horror. Like, this was one of the books that, while I did not absolutely love while reading it, it is pretty dense and very technical. It is one that I still continue to think about every time I'm near a body of water. Every time I think about this book. So I do really want to read more of her works. Her backlist is so long and there's so many different things that it'll be easy to just kind of binge everything that she's written. So I definitely want to see what she does with some of the other genres like her urban fantasy that I have not read. Then let's go back into a fantasy author, and that is Mark Lawrence. I read Red Sister and Gray Sister pretty recently and really enjoyed both of them. Mark Lawrence has a very gritty writing style and is willing to really push those boundaries of his characters and his gray morality. It's probably more of a black morality for some of his characters, honestly. So I am really looking forward to reading more of his works. I know that there is a spin-off series of this one that does read a little bit more YA, but once I finish this trilogy, I do want to give that one another go. He's also got the Prince of Thorns trilogy and the spin-off of that one. So there's a pretty extensive list of Mark Lawrence that I really want to get to. I think he's a strong fantasy author, and I'm excited to read more. Then let's just go in the complete opposite direction and talk about some romance, and that's Sophie Lark. So Sophie Lark, they're all different series, like the Brutal Birthright series, but they all are needed in succession to kind of read further along the line, and there's a lot of them. She's also written the duology, There Is No Devil and There Are No Saints, which I really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Sophie Lark. I've gotten through the first 3 of the Brutal Birthright series. I've read the duology, and now I'm just excited to continue and see what else she has in store for her mafia romances. And then the last 2 that I want to talk about, one is Kate Elliott. This is the only book that I have read by Kate Elliott. It is a little bitty novella, and I enjoyed it, but my biggest complaint was that I really wanted more. I could see the world building and how interesting and detailed and engaging it was going to be, but this was just way too short for me to really fully immerse myself, and I know that she has a very extensive backlist, like, look at that. So I am super, super excited to read more from her. I really enjoyed the writing style. Like I said, I could see where that world building was coming from. So I want to pick up one of her longer novels to really get a handle on how she builds worlds and how she writes on a longer, lengthier scale. So once again, if you've read some Kate Elliott, please let me know what I should start with down below. I know that she's got some genre crossover, and I'm leaning more toward wanting to try some of her harder fantasy because that's what I enjoyed so much in this one, and then I'll move on to some of her other genres after that. And last but not least, we have T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher, I've read The Hollow Places and The Twisted Ones, and really enjoy both of them. Hollow Places by far is the standout of those two, but I really enjoy them both. T. Kingfisher does a little bit of everything. She writes some like more fantasy novels, but all I have read are her horror stuff, and the horror is just weird and twisted, and I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading more of her horror for sure, but I do want to dip my toe into the fantasy world as well. I think she just came out with a new one that has a rabbit on the cover, and for some reason I cannot think of the name of it. May not be out yet. And then Nettle and Bone, which is more of a fantasy series, so I definitely want to read both of those. She has The Paladins, so there's a very long list of reads that I need to get to from T. Kingfisher, and I'm super excited to do so. Okay, so I think that concludes the 10 authors that I really want to read more from. Let me know down in the comments who you are just really vibing with right now and definitely want to read more of those works. If you have read any of these authors, and again, there is a particular book that you really think that I would enjoy from them that you think I should pick up next, please let me know. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!